Every psychological pattern that you struggle to break has three things in common. The struggle changes once you understand the story I am about to tell you. You know this pattern, you know what it is, and you can name it and you can trace it back to where it comes from. You can explain the psychology behind it, probably with real precision. You have worked on it with a therapist and often for years. But the truth is that there are still moments when it takes over before you have time to choose. It seems to be faster than your thought, almost older than your intention, and you are left standing in the aftermath, asking yourself, why does that still happen? So today I'd like to share with you a framework that actually explains this. I'm going to tell you the story of a Japanese soldier named Hiro Onoda and the concept that I call the Onoda effect. Stay until the end because your patterns work exactly the same way. What I see again and again in my practice is that the problem is rarely a lack of self-knowledge. It is something actually more specific. And once you see it clearly, something shifts. So let's start with a story. In 1944, Hiro Onoda is a young Japanese intelligence officer stationed on a small island in the Philippines. The war with America is intensifying, there is bombing on the island, and before departing, his commanding officers gives him a direct order. He says, protect this territory, never surrender, fight until your last breath. And he said, I'm the only one who can relieve you of this mission. Ironically, the war ends a few weeks later, but Onoda doesn't know. So he keeps fighting for 29 years. He raids farms, he burns supplies, he shoots at police officers, and he survives alone in this very dense jungle. And he builds shelters, he read the terrain, and he's obeying an order given in a world that has already ceased to exist. And the thing is that when the authorities try to reach him, dropping leaflets announcing Japan's surrender, they even send family members to call to him through the trees while nothing works. In fact, every attempt to convince him only reinforces his conviction. The enemy is getting more sophisticated, he thinks. The war must be escalating. And he finally lays down his weapon in 1974. Not because someone overwhelmed him, but because his original commanding officer returned to the island, stood before him and officially said, the war is over. I relieve you of your mission. And then finally, Onoda accepted to lay down his gun and he wept. So let me tell you what this story has to do with you, because every pattern that feels impossible to change, the people-pleasing behavior, the withdrawing, the explosions of anger, the need to control, the procrastination, it has the same three-part structure underneath it. So first, there is a threat that at some point was real. A moment in your life, often early in childhood, when something genuinely dangerous happened. It was not necessarily dramatic, but sometimes it was simply years of emotional neglect or unpredictability. This feeling that love was conditional on performance. Learning that showing your real self produced punishment or rejection. And the threat was real. Second, there's a strategy that worked. Your subconscious mind is not stupid, it's actually smart, and it found a response that reduced the pain. For example, pleasing others meant safety, or disappearing meant no one could hurt you. Controlling kept chaos at bay, and it worked. And because it worked, your subconscious filed it not as a temporary solution, but as a permanent survival strategy. Third, a subconscious that never received the update. The threat passed, and of course you grew up, the world changed. But the part of you running that strategy, well, guess what? It has never got the message. It is still somewhere in the jungle hiding, still on watch, still protecting you from a danger that no longer exists. And the real tragedy is not that you are broken. The tragedy is that your subconscious is loyal to a version of reality that ended a long, long time ago. So what actually works? Well, this is where most conventional approaches miss entirely. If you try to fight this pattern, if you try to shame it, overwrite it, well, in fact, what you're doing is you're dropping leaflets on Onoda, trying to convince him that the war is over. But from his perspective, the attack is proof that the threat is real. So the pattern consolidates. It gets, in fact, stronger, not weaker. So what works is radically different. First, you have to go and find this soldier. The way that young adventurer Suzuki found Onoda in the jungle, not to capture him, but to meet him, without agenda, without judgment, to understand what threat he was facing and what order he had been given, and how hard he had been working, how long he had been alone, and then only then the commanding officer can arrive. In therapeutic terms, this is the wisest, most grounded part of you. This is what IFS calls self-energy. And you can meet that loyal frozen part with a genuine recognition and finally say, oh, I see what you have done. I understand why now. You don't have to fight anymore. Thank you for what you have done. But now it's safe to come home. And this is only when something different becomes possible. It's not forced, it's actually updated the way it understands. This is the work I do using hypnosis and IFS together, not to override the pattern, but to finally deliver the message at the level it understands and in a way that it has been waiting for. It's not trying to ruin your life, it's trying to protect it with everything it has. But based on information, it never got corrected. So the question is not how to silence that part, it's how to find it, understand it, meet it with a genuine curiosity and give it permission to rest. So I will leave you with this. Who is your Onoda? What threat is he still protecting you from? And what would it mean to finally deliver the message that he has been waiting for? If you want to know more, the full written framework is in the description. And I would genuinely love to hear what resonates.